Hey everyone, welcome to another comic book thoughts video where I talk about the new comics I've read in the past week. And usually I do this as a countdown, but this time I have 26 comics from 2 weeks. I can't believe what giant fat weeks of comics, I think especially the first week, that happened while I was gone. I am eager to catch up because I really enjoy my comics most by reading them week by week, more than any other way I've found, and talking about them here on YouTube on my little comic book diary here. So, I'm not drinking beer, I'm drinking coffee. The addictiveness of nitro brewed coffee is great these days. Getting jacked up. Um, so yeah, I am really addicted to this, putting everything into this video diary of my reading, and really like doing it week by week. So I have this conundrum of these 26 issues. Do I just not talk about them in a video? Do I pick the best ones and not talk about the rest? I'm just decided to quickly go through the pile. It is ordered from very roughly, like I put together 3 piles or 4 piles of stuff, from the stuff I was least excited about after reading it to the stuff I was most excited about. And so I want to mention a little bit about each one. Maybe I should do like a star rating or something. One thing I noticed a lot, well, 2 things, is shotgunning too many comics at once. I was not at the point of hating reading comics, but there were some days where I was like, I don't want to read any more comics. And I put it off because I originally had hoped to do this video 2 days before today. But here we are. It's a Friday right now. So starting later this afternoon, I will start reading the comics that came out this Wednesday. And it looks like there's some good ones there. I think I have a total of 9 or 10. So, you know, hopefully I will get to it and get back on my regular schedule because I really like being on my regular schedule, as I already said. Um, so the thing, along with sometimes reading too many comics or forcing yourself to read comics, that's a bad thing. The other thing is that I had a stronger feeling of many occasions thinking as I was reading these to myself, this might have been better if I could remember everything. In other words, if I'd read it in trades or shotgunned a bunch of issues together or had time to go back and reread stuff. Um, and that's just kind of food for thought. Is that the fault of the writers, or is it my fault as a reader? Um, anyway, and do serialized comics still make sense? It's still my favorite way to read them, but they're not all written like that. So probably what would have been lowest on my list might be American Vampire 1976. This is the final issue, book 10. It had some strong points along the way, but by the end, I still am not emotionally connecting with it as much as I should. And I think a lot of that has to do because I have only read the American Vampire 1976 series, not all the other American Vampire books before it. So it doesn't stand alone in an emotional sense. It's supposed to cap off the entire series, I guess. And I don't know if there's more to come. I feel like as the hero is kind of dead at the end. Is he? Just spoiler, possibly. Um, but it also felt like the final battle or whatever it was just stretched out and stretched out and stretched out. Like they decided they wanted this to be 2 5-issue trades, so they had to stretch it out. This probably could have been a 7 or 8-issue story, I'm thinking. Another kind of disappointment was the final issue of Grendel Devil's Odyssey. I guess I don't want to spoil it for some people who might want to read this in trade, but I guess I'm not recommending it very highly in trade because I feel like I enjoyed the journey, but by the final issue, it seemed to tell me there was no point to the journey. There was one issue here before this issue 7, that I didn't like either. That was the finale of kind of a 2-part story, I think, or was it a 3-part story? But everything else held together nicely as a bunch of short science fiction vignettes. that Grendel kind of passed through as he was looking for a planet to restart humanity on. But the conclusion here, it propels us into some new adventures, but I found it it made me feel like the journey of the book went nowhere. Jenny Zero, I love this cover. I think it's mostly the colors, but also the composition of the two characters coming at each other from these angles. I don't know if you see that so often anymore. Usually people are coming from one side of the page to the other. But the art on the inside felt very fast and loose, so to speak. The colors are nice. And it's my own fault that I didn't enjoy this much because I missed issue 3, so I didn't know what was going on anymore. And it was a big fight scene, and I just did not even connect with the fallout of events, so it was all meaningless to me. And I don't know whether I'll bother looking for issue 3 and then continue, or just say this one's well enough left alone. I liked the first 2 issues though, so I don't know if it went off the rails, would have gone off the rails for me anyway. What did go off the rails for me, and after deep soul searching, I told my comic book shop to remove it from my pull list, was The Good Asian. I really liked this at first, and the plot is just all over the place at this point, and I can't understand people's motivations or the significance of events, and it feels like stuff is skipped over or gone into too much depth. It's all rough and uneven, which is a bit surprising. I can't remember what shows this writer's written one other comic, but he's written a lot of TV shows, and I think the one thing that a TV show writer learns to do is stick to those formulas and make everything clear, but it's not working. I'm on the edge about whether to continue with Inkblot or not. Another one that just did not do a lot for me. I'm starting to feel like the two authors who are both artists and writers here, are not going to really pull it together and not going to really create a story that I, as a reader, am going to enjoy without having to extrapolate or guess what they really meant or how they really, like, I don't know. It's getting to the point where maybe their lack of experience is bogging me down, because I believe this is the first comic either of them have written. And I don't know if they've drawn any other comics either, although I think they both went to the Kubert Art School, one of them being Emma Kubert, the granddaughter of Joe Kubert. It's been a fun ride, but each issue now is getting a little weaker. I really wanted to love Secret Land. Again, I really like this secret Nazi project going on after the war's over everywhere else that has this strong kind of H.P. Lovecraft, Cthulhu kind of reaching into another dimension kind of feeling. And these sort of star-crossed lovers from World War II and stuff, and being this woman being an undercover agent amongst the Nazis. But the writing's not horrible. The art is kind of slapdash. I've noted before, and it just keeps getting a little more slapdash feeling, that the artist in this has no credit as a creator or a copyright holder of it, and I think you just get kind of hastily done art here. Now, I might be wrong. Maybe the artist would do just the same job if he or she, I think, had a full stake in the project. Also, disappointing to me, I did not like issue 1 of Fantastic Four Life Story, and I liked issue 2, and I'm again finding issue 3 very weak. I read 2 Mark Russell comics this week, and one I really liked a lot, and one I did not. And I find it odd. They don't feel like a team at all. And I guess there's a lot of, a sort of commentary on Ronald Reagan and the Star Wars Star Wars initiative of Ronald Reagan, but there's not the analysis does not run deep, but it seems to be the main focus. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a Fantastic Four story at all. And what I found was interesting is I listened to a podcast where Mark Russell was talking about this, and he said, that the Fantastic Four was his favorite superhero thing to do because of being all about family and stuff. And yet, at most turns, maybe to him the family is between the issues, and he undoes the familyness in the issues that. There is a relationship, a bit more of a family relationship here, particularly between Johnny and what's his name, the son of Sue and Reed. I do like the way this artist. I don't like this artist's art very much, but I actually like the way he draws the Thing. Most modern artists' depiction of the Thing doesn't work for me. Anyway, I just found it funny that Mark Russell said he likes it because of the family feel. But he hasn't, like in the first issue, Ben Grimm and Reed Richards were strangers to each other. They didn't know each other. And in the second issue, Sue Storm gets a divorce, and she's still divorced in the 1980s. She gets a divorce, or she separates from Reed in the 70s, and she's asking for a divorce here in the 80s. But there's never any adventures here where they're all together at all. So Silver Coin was solid. I did decide to take it off my pull list. It's going to continue. It was originally just going to be 5 issues. Here we get the origin of the coin, and it's a solid horror story, and really nice artwork and everything. So I definitely enjoyed reading it. But I didn't feel like, oh wow, this silver coin concept is so cool that I need to read every issue. So he's gonna continue with a different writer on each issue, and I'm just gonna keep an eye out at the shop and see if it looks interesting in a given month, and then I might pick it up. And then, okay, in a way, this is like one of the better comics of the week, and also one of the worst. The Immortal Hulk number 49. I can't believe in the penultimate issue of this massive sort of saga about the Hulk. Although it started as a series of short stories and then evolved into this more complex story that now is, let's face it, it's become a mess. But the entire story is done like this: a picture and a bunch of text along the side. Every single page. And I guess you might say, oh, that makes it special. Or you might say, oh, that throws you right out of your normal comic book reading, right when you wanted to go deeper in the story because you are, so involved after 48 issues. It actually, once I forced myself, I wish it was at least in like comic book font, rather than some kind of, it looks like font in like a very generic corporate brochure or something. But once I got past that and read it, it actually was pretty interesting. I think it was both the writer buying for time and kind of giving the artist a break, because I have been buying Joe Bennett's art, or I did a while back, and you can't help but noticing when he does a fantastic splash page or double page spread, that goes for $1,000 or more. And when he does a page with 6 panels of people talking, that goes for $90. So this is going to be nice for Joe Bennett's pocketbook when he sells the original art, since every page is essentially a splash page. And the art looked very good. But yeah, look, he's going to get a lot of money for that page. It just was a very small stepping stone of the story. And plus, I'm just looking forward to reading a comic book, not a corporate brochure that's about the Hulk. Um, so both better and not nearly as good as the Immortal Hulk was Geiger number 5. And I guess next issue is going to be a double size issue. I'm enjoying reading this. It's not, so far, it's not giving me more than just an interesting post apocalyptic story. Um, but without, there's just no extra layer to it at all. But with incredible art. I feel like this, I've never liked Gary Frank's art more. So if you're a Gary Frank fan or a fan of this sort of style of art, this comic is a no-brainer. And it's a wonderful package, fantastic, cardstock cover, good quality paper throughout. So I can't diss it there. I guess it's not as much as I wanted it to be. And maybe a lot of that has to do with there being so many post-apocalyptic comics out there. Lucky Devil, I was looking forward to this. Colin Bunn is on a hot streak with his horror comics. He's got so many out there. Most of them are good now. I used to think of him as hit and miss, but now I think of him as kind of hit all the time. But this was a semi-miss because it seemed to be like it was missing some pages in the middle. Like the story just jumped forward in a very disconcerting to me manner, where I just suddenly felt unsatisfied. And I was thinking about this with all the Colin Bunn horror I've been reading. Most horror is variations on familiar tropes. And this one's certainly that. A loser schlub makes some kind of deal with a demon. Only I guess we don't see the deal. The demon just comes along and takes over or something. I'm just not sure. So, so one of the things I want from a horror comic, because it's also familiar, is to do it in the most satisfying way. And so that feeling that this just made this kind of sloppy skip over important details really disappointed me. And maybe I also, of the artists that Colin Bunn's working with at the moment, I'd say this style is the least, Damien friendly style. The colors are pretty cool and everything, and he's a good storyteller as far as I can tell, unless it's the artist's fault that we skipped over something. But I just don't click with the style much. The Dreaming, Waking Hours. It ended. It ended as it's been going along, kind of shaggy. It's kind of a shaggy ending, with an emphasis on the pretty boy gay romance, if you will, between a human guy, I don't know if he's a teenager or what, and this purple-haired guy who is, what is he? He's some kind of nightmare from a dream, but he doesn't want to be evil. What's he called? Ruin. He's called Ruin. So you kind of have, I don't know, all these different things happen. Like they solve the problem in Fairy, and then they solve the problem of the angel, and then they solve the problem of the two lovers who want to be together. It just seems kind of baggy and kind of a living out of a certain kind of fantasy, maybe, of a woman who wants to fix all her friends' problems, and I guess she does. I still really love the first sort of arc of this, and then it's been kind of all over the place for me. It wasn't a bad read, and a good art. Ordinary Gods, also, this one isn't Colin Bunn. It reminds me of a Colin Bunn story. It's by Kyle Higgins, and it's kind of a cool, almost Neil Gaiman-ish kind of thing, with these gods from another world who've been reincarnated on Earth, mostly as humans, but it turns out one is a dog. Again, the art doesn't do a lot for me, but there's nothing wrong with the art, and it tells the story pretty well. I'm definitely enjoying this one. And the story's moving forward in interesting ways. I think I'll be less interested, although I'd be happy to be proven wrong, when and if the story moves on to the moves off of Earth and back to the fantasy universe where it had its origins. We'll see, because that part feels more cliched. Out of Body continues to be this sort of slick murder thriller with astral projection and trippy stuff, and naughty bits thrown in by Peter Milligan. It's definitely worth reading, but it definitely feels kind of commercial in a way for a Peter Milligan doing commercial work. And Inaki Miranda is doing solid work, but not his very best, as we saw on the comic that he has more ownership in, which is, oh, these are some nice pages though, which is We Live, which he owns. Whereas here, I think he's just a hired gun with no copyright involvement either. And we've got some very bad guys. We do have the main character who's discovering, as he goes on this journey to find out who killed him and exploring his powers as an astral projector, he's realizing he's not such a great guy himself. So that's the most interesting part of Out of Body. Engine Ward felt like it's wrapped up in this issue, but there's one more issue to go. And it was a big fight where, well, I guess I don't want to give it away for people who are, I mean, you obviously know who's fighting who if you read the last issue, and you can guess the result. So it kind of goes the way I wanted it or expected it to. So it was fun enough to read, but at the same time, no surprises or anything. And so I guess that's like another flaw of serialized reading, when you get to the part which you wouldn't be aware of if you were reading in, when you get to the inevitable part, the inevitable conclusion parts, if they're just inevitable without further twists, I don't think that would bother you as much if you hadn't waited a month or 2 months to read it than if you had read it all in a trade at once. I don't really know what to make of Snelson Comedy is Dying. I enjoyed reading it. It was pretty over the top. It was kind of like a slickly done underground comic in a way. Look at that. Hopefully Google and YouTube won't be looking at that too closely. The art was pretty interesting. It's about this politically correct comic, nightclub comic who's trying on a comeback tour with some friends of his who are like a black man and a transsexual woman comedians, which I guess is kind of his cover to say, it's all right to see my politically incorrect stuff because there's other people on this tour with me. Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know where it's going or why one even needs to read the next issue, but I'll probably get the next issue just to see what's up here. Yeah, kind of a very unique comic book. The Wrong Earth, Night and Day, has wrapped up, and it did it very perfunctorily, very too quickly. There was interesting stuff going on, and it's still I'm glad I read it, and it has these odd epilogues done by different artists, I think, that I guess imply the next story arc. But yeah, it was just a hasty and kind of odd wrap up to what was otherwise a very good story. I really liked the Me You Love in the Dark by Scotty Young, Jorge Corona, and Jean-Francis Boulot. I actually liked the lettering a lot in this one. I actually noticed that I was enjoying the lettering. The lettering is Nick Pecos. I can't imagine what they're going to do here, because this is basically, in this issue, a story about one person alone in a house trying to produce artwork. We get a brief interaction with a realtor, a brief interaction with her art dealer, and then she's talking to a ghost. I don't even know if she sees the ghost. She just heard there's a ghost in this house. So I thought it was an interesting little piece. It doesn't seem like a major work for popular consumption. Like, oh, I want to run out and get this story about an artist talking to herself. But maybe they'll have some. Oh, yeah. The ghost. Spoiler. The ghost finally talks to her on the final page. I guess that is what the ghost looks like. I don't know. So maybe it'll be interesting to see where this goes. My point was I enjoyed it a lot, but I was a little surprised that there wasn't more of a hook. Because I sort of think of Scotty Young as kind of a commercial style writer who's very slick at hooking you in and everything. Here's Basilisk, Colin Bunn, one of his very successful current horror series with some really excellent art by an artist I hadn't heard of previously, Jonah Scharf. Does he do his own coloring? Where are the credits? I'm trying to find. Another great book from Boom, I guess. Yeah. And Jonah Scharf is the illustrator. Alex Guimarães, or however one is supposed to pronounce that name, is the color artist. So they're working together really well. Again, like I said, it's horror with familiar tropes, but done a little bit differently. Not a whole lot differently, really. These evil, somewhat immortal characters with powers that allow them to cruelly kill anybody they want are wreaking havoc, and this woman has a plan, which is not too clear actually what her plan is. Has a plan to call them out and kill them back with the help of one of their members who has left them, the Basilisk. So we'll see where it goes. I can't totally judge it till it wraps up, really. But I've really been enjoying the ride, and probably a lot of that's, I suppose, due to the art. Also due to the art, The Golem Walks Among Us. I had read another couple of these Tales from the Outerverse by Christopher Golden and Mike Mignola, and I just on a whim picked this up because it had art by Peter Bergting, or however one pronounces his name, and I have really liked his art in the past, and I was not let down here. And it was kind of a cool story about the golem trying to help some women save a baby that's going to be sacrificed to this sea creature, this sea god monster. They only show it once in kind of a brief panel there. That's the evil god that has made this whole village evil. And I guess it ties into their whole plot of witches working for the Nazis and the Allies fighting against them. I can't remember if I've ever read about, I feel like I have read at some point about Mignola's Golem, but maybe that was a different Golem story. Defenders #1. I'm totally torn on this because I so love the art. And the writing is why I originally picked it up. Al Ewing. I wanted to see if he could do Immortal Hulk again, so to speak, work that magic again. And so far, no. It's like a giant, clumsy info dump. We're kind of gathering the team, but it's done in a very non-narrative style, in a sense, except that artist Javier Rodriguez is working his butt off to make this an exciting visual story. And I feel like he's kind of a cross between Jim Steranko and Steve Ditko. I liked it so much. I am including him or considering him worthy of standing in their shoes there. And it amazes me that more artists do not draw on all the storytelling tricks established by or reestablished in some cases by Jim Steranko. Jim Steranko drew a lot on Will Eisner, and he drew a lot on some of the EC artists and other places. I think he had a fantastic knowledge of comic book history up to the point where he was working. So yeah, you could also see a bit of Paul Galassi here, who was part of that tradition also. But fantastic art. Javier Rodriguez did his own coloring, and I wish he actually on some pages like this one differentiated figures more. I mean, he went to a lot of work to draw them, but at times they don't stand out quite as much as they should. But that's being picky. This is brilliant. I will get it all day long for the artwork. Hopefully, they have it on a schedule that Javier can keep up with it, and they won't have guest artists. And maybe Al Ewing will start trying to live up to the quality of the art once he sees what's coming out off the page. Man, oh man, is Javier Rodriguez giving his all. Okay, a much more interesting book than Fantastic Four: Life Story by Mike Russell is Not All Robots. Oops, I accidentally got two copies, but I guess they weren't in the pile. So this is one of the covers. I was fooled. When I went to a second comic book shop, I thought, oh, I must not have got Not All Robots, because I didn't recognize the cover. So now I have two different copies of this. But it's a very good story, and it has that Mark Russell, even though sometimes I'm complaining about him, like with Fantastic Four, there's a quality to his stories that I don't feel like any other writer that I can think of has. It's a certain kind of black humor that also ticks a lot of emotional boxes for me often, and I've noticed that Russell almost always, even in books that I'm not enjoying so much at first, pulls off a really satisfying ending too. There's just something about the way he writes that I really like, about the way he develops stories and characters within the context of his somewhat politically tinged black humor. And this one is all about environmentally devastated future world where robots are kind of the leaders of society in a sense, and they charitably put a robot in each human family to help support the family and keep them going. But now the robots are kind of questioning, why do we need humans and stuff? And of course, the humans aren't loving the robots that much either. So the odd thing is the artist, Mike Deodato, who on the right projects I really love, and I actually really love his art here, but it seems a very strange mix with the humorous, pathos-ish kind of story that Mark Russell's telling. And it makes me long for Deodato to do a really hardcore science fiction story that is a straight science fiction story, not a dark humor. But so there's a bit of disconnect between the art and the story, but it's still really satisfying to read. And as I'm just looking at the images now, it's really satisfying to just look at separate from the story. I don't know why Deodato has made this his style, where every page has these sort of panels. It's an interesting technique, but maybe he overuses it, or that's just an aesthetic choice. I'm trying to find any page where he doesn't use that technique. So that was very satisfying. And Eve, number 4, by Victor Laval and Joe Mi-Guillon and Brittany Peer, was a very satisfying issue. I loved issues 1 and 2. Issue 3, I started to worry was falling into more of a cliched post-apocalyptic story. But now that we've been revealed more of what's going on in issue 4, it goes back. It is it's a post-apocalyptic story, and it has mixed in some elements that you don't always see in post-apocalyptic stories, but are not unfamiliar science fiction elements, but mixed together very well. And some really cool moments in here. I don't want to give too much away. But yeah, and I guess there's some mainstream comic that Victor Laval is now signed up to write. So that'll be kind of interesting. I hope he doesn't get sucked away from these indie kind of projects too much though. And that was another Boom comic. Okay, this is the oddity of a really good comic that I have decided to drop from my pull list. Another really strong issue, but I also really strongly feel like I am having trouble keeping track of all the characters. And then I heard that Tinian and his creative team here are going to take a 5 or 6 month hiatus after the first half is done. And so I decided I'm just gonna drop it now. I'll pick up the trades when the entire thing is finished, hopefully all in one hardback, or two paperbacks, I suppose, might be the choice I'm stuck with, but I think I will understand it much more, and particularly a 5-month hiatus between part A and part B, that's just too much for me. If I were ranking comics, I would be struggling to decide between these two comics which should be number one. And it might be Kanto. I feel like this third Kanto series is the best yet. I mean, it builds on everything from the previous series, but it just, the mixture of kind of quirkiness and fairy tale qualities and the emotional quality of the characters just seems to be more refined than ever, and I'm liking the art even more than ever, the colors more than ever. It's definitely, it's like reading a kid's fairy tale, but a really good one. I really like it. Yeah. So I'm kind of talking myself into making this. This would have been my number one book. So now we're going to look at what would have been my number two book, Six Sidekicks of Trigger Keaton, issue 3. I really love this issue, and the only downside is the coloring choices. It looks nice. You glance at a page, and each page has kind of a monotone to it. But when you're trying to read it, and every panel just feels colored the same, it makes took me an extra effort to focus on what was going on. But it adds in this delightful female kung fu character who once worked for Trigger Keaton and whose career was ruined by him also. And she's this weird mix of total badassness and totally overly sympathetic to other people and caring for other people kind of thing. She's a really good foil for some of the other characters in our group. So it has me looking forward to even more Trigger Keaton. I have a feeling this is just a 6-issue series, but I'm now hoping it will be stretched out longer. But yeah, why color this way? I mean, maybe it's a matter of deadlines and stuff, but I think then they should have someone help him out with the colors or something. This page here is nice, a variety of colors, and it just helps you read the page better. So that's it. I made it through all of them, kind of shotgun. Only 38 minutes, 39 minutes probably by the time I'm done. Thanks for everyone hanging in there. I probably should have mentioned at the beginning, we're talking about Rose City Comic Con that's coming up, doing a kind of after-hours get-together with YouTube and YouTube-related people, people who watch YouTube or have channels who happen to be at Rose City Comic Con on the Saturday night of Rose City. There's a bar that John Stout has mentioned to me, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. But I will talk more about it on upcoming videos. Oh, and the other thing is I am going to be on Bueller's Monday morning coffee video this week as a poor substitute for Bullseye Bob. So I'm really looking forward to that. Tomorrow I'll go over to Bueller's and we'll record the episode. We're going to talk about Substack. We're going to talk about Substack. So that should be fun and interesting to see myself in Bob's spot. Talk to y'all later. Bye bye.